Welcome back to Perspectives. I'm your host, Patrice Bobo-Miles, and today I have with me Jeremy Wenger. So, Jeremy, take a minute and tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Yeah, Jeremy Wenger. I'm the tiny home plug. I focus all just 100% in affordable housing development, all the way to fast luxury builds in the modular container space, and just having an absolute blast working with people on different missions in the real estate space.
Tiny homes and containments. So, let's kind of dive into that because, we know housing affordability is a real issue right now, right?
Hmm.
Housing prices are higher than what we have been accustomed to in the last, I guess I could say 20 years. That's fair. And of course, the buyers in today's markets have gotten really used to really low interest rates. But of
Hmm.
course, all of that had to change. And hyperinflation made its way in. And so now there's this let's stop the bleeding, so to say. So we're seeing, the Fed do incremental increases of the prime lending rate. And while that's not a direct impact on mortgage rates, it is an indirect impact on mortgage rates. So, we're looking at mortgage rates nationwide, um, probably sevens, maybe a little bit higher. And so couple that with a higher cost to buy homes and houses, affordability's become a real issue. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just all on all sides. The numbers side of it. Being able to the holding cost, the labor cost on it. I mean, it's all the way around. I mean, it's not even about it being directly affected. It's a matter of like what is the daisy chain reaction to it, right? And that's just really. I mean, everything just falls suit. And that's why it's like I mean, I grew up in the trades, and I've been in landscaping for over 11 years too. I grew up in the tree industry with my dad. He had a tree company for over 20 years, and so over that time, I've had the blessed fortune to be able to build out a contractor network, and go to have bad and fugly way and know who's what and who's full of it and who's not, and who keeps their word. And like it's a different ball game, when you're looking at trying to create something that does make sense, at the end of the day too, that it creates a good experience for those who you're trying to sell your product to, right?
Mhm,
And that's
mhm.
like you got to factor all those things in. Like, I mean, gosh, we're got a project right now. We're trying to figure out foundation cost. But I mean, based on easements and all of that stuff, and I mean, all of that included from the civil engineer, like you have to weigh it all out. And it's stuff is it's overwhelming at times. The opportunity itself is overwhelming, but also too the little small things that go into it,
Right,
it gets overwhelming too. Yeah.
right. So tell me, tiny home plug. What 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 is tiny home plug, and how, do you think that that's a good way to combat some of what affordability is in owning a home?
Well, I mean, the tiny home plug is, it's a consultancy. It's completely vertically integrated all the way into funding. So from concept to exit, I mean, we've got investors that love turnkey projects that are looking for these, and they don't want to go into the ground up. Some do. A lot of folks love being able to dive into that. And it's interesting because in this field, you look at, because we're in the modular container space, right? We're using the 40-foot high cubes, 20-foot high cubes, to be able to create different types of dwellings. Whether
Okay, I'm
it's
going to stop you. I'm going to stop you. So we're talking about cubes. So be a little more specific of what that is.
Oh wait, sorry.
For
I'm
someone, I
I
know,
can't
I
point.
know.
Well, so like the shipping containers, like the big old long 40-foot shipping containers. The specific type of the containers is called a high cube, which means it's 9.5 foot tall and 8 foot wide. And so it's a standard one is a little bit shorter, a little bit skinnier, but it is just to kind of nutshell it. But that's where we're taking those and reinforcing them up to modular housing standards, which is up to the traditional stick build standards as well, and to be able to make sure that they actually can withstand crazy amount of heat, crazy amount of cold. And there's also too, we've got different builders to be able to go at to the luxury side of it, go crazy with it, but also some that will do event focused ones. But when we're talking about real estate, that's where you look at how can we create something that is of abundance, right? I mean, after post pandemic, there's a lot of containers that are just decommissioned that are at shipping yards. I mean, Yeah, this is just one route. There's set panels and other types of ways to do different types of structures. But when it comes to the shipping containers, I mean, those are hurricane proof. When they're reinforced, they can withstand 100 up to 160 mile an hour wind load. And so that's where it gets really interesting, because if we can really fast track the speed of production and get through that process, and with that modular process, I mean, it makes the whole entire development easier and with less friction. And so that's why with the containers, I mean, there's a lot of them there, and they can get cranked out really quickly. And talk about making a single family home out of the containers like a Lego set. It gets pretty nuts.
So you are telling me that you can take a shipping container, a decommissioned shipping container, or several, and cobble them together to create a single family residence, a home.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So just in round numbers, what is the difference in cost in, that type of construction versus your standard stick and brick construction?
I mean, the besides the big obvious, like it takes less time. It's like we can crank out. Our team can crank out 10 units a week. Up to 10 units a week right now. We're planning to go. We're planning to expand that. The biggest advantages, there's pros and cons to everything, right? There's we can make a 3 bedroom, 3 bath home, within a matter of weeks. Now, that's where compared to months or even 18 to 24 months in some markets, in some cases, with depending on subcontractors. So that's a whole other conversation in itself too, and that's where like we were able to really go through that. The biggest challenge is the foundation, so like that's depending on the weight. So the biggest pros to it is we have virtually zero labor cost, because all the units are created in our manufacturing facility. It's sealed on site for the modular stamp, which bypasses inspections. It's inspected on site, which is awesome. But then
back up.
Right.
I love this. I'm just going to. All right. So we're talking modular. So go ahead and explain the difference between a modular home and a standard construction.
Well, I mean, the modular is so standard construction is going to have your stick build, you have your studded out, your framed out, you have your different build process with that. So you have your foundation you have to pour, obviously, which would be the same with modular, because there has to be a permanent foundation that goes on it. And of course, there's different ways to do different asset classes, which we'll get into. But with the modular, we build all of it in a manufacturing facility. And like the IKEA for homes, all that's built in you're not like, it's not like ordering from wish.com though. You're not going to get like a dollhouse. I mean,
right.
Technically, but like when it comes to a traditional style home, you have your 1200 square foot home, right? Average. You look at, even to look at 2000 square foot home, up to however many square feet. You look at how that process, you have to go through, of course, the inspections, which is a nightmare at times. Mm-hmm. And post pandemic, I'm just going to say inspectors and appraisers really, they can write their own check. We'll just say that. And so, like when it comes down to that inspection process, it can get extremely tedious on the traditional build side. Especially with those developers and those builders who are going to hear this and see this, and who do craftsman style homes know exactly what I'm talking about. And so the comparison is that on modular, what we do is we build all the different components. We'll design it, have everything as far as the architectural layout, be able to go through with you as far as even to making sure that the plot, the land that you have will work for modular, because different zoning and different communities will prefer different things. And so that's, with the traditional style, you have less friction as far as the community approvals and all that. But when it comes down to the hold cost, sometimes that doesn't makes it's just completely not worth it. And so there's that trade-off, and where we can help position on the modular side of it to say, look, just because it's not a traditional build doesn't mean the structural integrity is not going to be there. And that's where so the foundation process is the same, when it comes down to utilities and all that jazz. But then we look at the weight load. We look at if we're doing 2-story, Each one of those containers can be about 20,000 pounds roughly. So we look at how that foundation needs to be reinforced. And so we look at, how deep does it need to go, get the soil testing, get everything done from the civil engineer, and look at all that process together. But even to bringing all of that, in that whole entire scope of opportunity cost, right? We look at all those different things, like what are we really trading off on? I mean, we look at traditional build probably 6 to 8 months on a low end, right? And that's on the low end. And then you look at, weather problems, getting approvals, getting the inspections, all that can probably forecast it out to maybe 15 months, max. Or being conservative, right? So then you look at modular, 5 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yes, you have to consider the foundation side of it. But honestly, at the end of the day, when you're looking at 3 months compared to 15 months, it changes the game. Instead of 3 quarters, you go into 3 months.
Right,
So,
right. So technically, the modular home is built off-site,
mhm.
and the completed home is then um,
Well, I'll say
not,
this.
or the
Well, I'll say this
it's
disclaimer:
project
we can do
foundation.
both. Yeah, we can do both. We can build it completely off-site, or have a combination of a hybrid where we have the majority of those containers delivered on site based on the foundation. Because some people want to be able to bridge and create a big old carport-like feature over it with a roof to be able to create a bigger living space, and that actually increases the square footage. But also, too, some counties, they want to have maybe 30%, 40% of that home built on site. No problem. Coordinate with GC. Done.
Right.
And so that's, sorry, I wanted to throw that in there really quick because I forgot to mention that, because we can do both the entire build on offsite, or based on requirements of that whole entire the county. I mean, we can accommodate.
So why isn't this considered like a manufactured home? Because manufactured homes are kind of built off-site too.
Hmm. Well, it's just a different licensing, different standard. Where when it comes down to the modular side of it, manufacturer is not up to standard of a traditional built home, and so the modular license actually is up to that standard, up to that whole, like, it's not subpar. It's right equal with a traditional build, and that's part of why it has a different asset class. I mean, the irony is that we can even too make mobile home assets out of these, and they're stronger. And that's what's interesting about with modular, is that when you're making them out of the containers, because modular, you can be tacked onto different things, right? It can be tacked onto, it's just a standard. And so that's where with these containers, with the modular containers, with those two things being factored together, the hurricane proof. And even if I'll just say this, the tornado hits this, because of how heavy it is about how much it's going to do. It's just going to sway back and forth, instead of it being instead of it just going with it, majority.
Hmm.
And that's where even two worst case scenario is shaking up a little bit, but that's about it, because of how the weight on it. It's like if you have if you're, I don't know if you've driven the cars fast. I have, and I've suffered the consequence. And you're like, are you kidding me? Like, but that's where that weight load helps also too, being able to anchor it to the ground as well. So that's one of the different trade-offs with it as well.
So we're talking affordability here.
Mhm.
So average, let's talk cost. Let's talk money.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we are looking at the option to purchase
Mhm.
for your primary, for your home, where you
Mhm.
want to live, where you want to raise your kids, whatever you want to do with it, for your home, what is the difference in cost between uh, this type of home and a standard build?
I mean, it just varies. I mean, cost per square foot is going to be more, just because of the,
Let's go 1,200 square feet to 1,200 square feet.
yeah. I mean, 1,200 square foot one, probably we'll look at, be 3 or 4 containers. I have to do some math on it. But our double wide would be around, so like we have 2 containers together. So if we do 1,200 square foot, I should know this off the top of my head. But so yeah, we have 4 containers roughly is what that's going to be, and so probably right around 200,000 or so, maybe around 230 or so,
Mhm.
depending, though it could be less, because it varies on what those components are going to be used for, right?
Mhm.
If it's going to be a bedroom or whatever, so that could go down to, I mean, it could go down to 180.
Let
It
me
can
give
go.
you this disclaimer. The numbers that we're discussing are hypothetical numbers,
Absolutely.
just to kind of give a comparison. So Jeremy and his company cannot be held. to the standard of what the numbers are that we are discussing. Okay, let's try it again.
Yeah, and that's a very good disclaimer. I appreciate you catching me on that because that it varies. It really does. I mean, it's
Mhm.
just people get creative, man. They really do. I mean, it could be two containers at 1,200 square foot because they could do a whole bridge over on it and make a massive, massive area and repurpose. I mean, it can get nuts. We can go four containers. We can do two on the bottom, right, and then one on top. And I mean, we can go three on the bottom and one on top. I mean, it can go nuts. And so, yeah.
All right, let's look at, and again, this is hypothetical, but I'm really trying to drill down a number because I really want to be able to numerically demonstrate
Well, yeah. So if we go four
how this
containers,
falls
yeah,
into to affordability.
yeah. So it's 3 3/4 containers. So for the container is going to be right around like 1,300, 1,400, like 1,300, or right around like right under 1,400 square foot is for the containers.
Mhm,
So I think that's 320 square foot per container.
mhm.
And so depending on that, it'd be right around 200,000. Give or take, probably 230 around four of the containers, but they're done in a month. And
And we're looking at a standard build, and again, this is a first time home entry level. I'm not talking about granite and marble and travertine,
oh
and
yeah.
So if I'm looking at a standard build, we're looking at what do you think is a fair asking price there? And
I mean,
in excess of, how's that? In
and
excess
where?
of what? In excess of
Who?
280.
Yeah, I mean, 280 depends on the market though too, right?
Right. It
But
does. It does.
I mean, some of the lower markets. I live in Huntsville, Alabama, and so
Mhm.
like 1,200 square foot home, probably about 250, 280 roughly. Here it's good. High end probably 320. But even then though too, you look at, I mean, what is the square footage used for, right? If it's bedrooms, it can vary the price as well. If it's a bigger living room area, but yeah, I mean, I'd say because we look at the modular, it'd probably be around 180 on a mid range. 180 to 200 on a mid range. 230 out the door. If we go a little bit higher up on it. Yeah, if we go two story, then yeah, it'd be around 230.
But I'm
Because
in
yeah.
Florida. You're in Alabama, so it's really, really hard to find a mid-level home at 180
Oh,
here.
I know.
Now, it's hard to find that. It's hard to find a mid-level home, in the
Yeah,
market that I'm in for anything under 300, honestly.
yeah,
So, I can look at 180 versus, 285, 300,000, and I can see a huge benefit to what that kind of construction is.
yeah.
So, where do you guys build and ship, and how do you do that?
We have two different facilities. One actually here in Alabama, in Decatur, which is like the city next to me in Huntsville, which is 45 minutes from where I live, and then one up in Indiana. And so we accommodate. We're actually about to open up another location as well. And so we're keeping up with the demand, and our goal is to help put a dent in it and to be able to really help equip other people. So yeah, we're the shipping. It just depends on which is like closer, which would be here in Decatur. And so we just factor from the plant location to that address. And it's I think it was like probably 350, $4 a mile max. That's one way. So that way it's you don't get charged both ways.
Well, what turned you on to this?
My people hurting. I got sick and tired of people pointing fingers and observing the problems and not actually coming up with a solution. And that's one of the biggest things. I grew up in the trades, and I've always had something in my heart to want to be able to put the dots together, put the people together, because that's why I started the campaign called "Cancel the Housing Crisis," because for me, I my wife will tell you that I thrive when people come together. I thrive on unity, and I also thrive when I'm able to mobilize and equip people. And so when it comes down to the container space, I actually have a buddy of mine who they actually build luxury container homes. They're about to get off the ground with their company, and so he's the one that brought my attention to it a while back. But had been on my mind for years, for finding a solution and looking at ways that we can configure things and be able to dig into what can we really pull together, because I've worked with the real estate investors for the past 10 years, but I was the one productizing their companies. Investors, real estate brokers, agents. So been in landscaping for over 11 years. So coming from the trades side of it, speaking contractor needs and not putting up with any fluff or bullcrap or anything like that. Being able to translate that into literally all, I mean, to the tech side of it, it's like all of that being said, with boots on the ground and understanding macroeconomics and micro, it's like how can we really pull this together and really help people out? And I have a huge heart for affordable housing, and so that's for me. It's like every single time we talk about an idea, and any of the investors I talk to, even if they're just starting out or if they have an opportunity zone fund, whatever the case is, everything would be stopped at the numbers. Okay, obviously, duh. But also too, how can we make the numbers work? Like, how can we? What are the number one things holding people back, right? And how can we really bypass that, figure it all out, and develop it down to a science to really streamline that? Because right now in our culture, right, everyone's needing to be able to create leverage, period, right? And it's like the old saying, learn a skill to pay the bills. That's like people are right now. I mean, especially so I know a lot of like real estate investors that are buying businesses because real estate's not making them money, not the way that they could on the cash flow of a business. But if we could do both, how can we marry the two together? It's like have the tax benefit of real estate, but also generate the cash flow, whatever the business model is. From being able to different business models have different cash flow opportunities, and also based on the experience. And what's wild is that BC before the pandemic, let's say pandemic, but before COVID, all that stuff happening, a lot of people took for granted what they had. And that's when all of everything shut down, people became really conscientious of what is really important. And for me, I'm like there's got to be something that can be done that where it works, and there's a huge trend. And so I took my understanding of from the trades side of it and working with contractors. I mean, we'll sub out jobs doing so many different projects that we don't do as a landscaping company to sub out to them to help feed and put food on the family, or put food on the table for their family. And it's like how can we band together all investors, all different folks focused in different lanes, to have a solution that is like applicable to so many different occasions, from Section 8, from those or needing a leg up, to workforce housing, transitional living, rehab facilities, group homes, all of that, to single family homes, to really truly helping to also with short term rentals, with corporate housing. I mean, all these different areas. Like, how can we do that? And it really just opened up, and it's like, holy smokes! No wonder I feel alive in this season more than I ever have in my entire life. Because for me, I hate it when people suffer. I can't stand it. But also too, I understand from the lending side of it, the where people need to also too make sure that they get their ducks in a row, because there's a lot of stuff when it comes to raising capital if you don't have your business plan in place. Even if with your single family home, like if you can't pay the bills, I mean, it's going to be tough to keep it. And so it's like, how can we have something that is durable, that's going to stand the test of time, but also to able to feed, like be able to foot the bill, and be able to bypass everything that's already out there, all the hurdles, majority of them, and go straight to market, and get things out there. Because I'm tired of people talking about the problem. I'm sick of it. I'm beyond sick of it, and I will go through hell and high water to make something work. Because if we can, without it being, I mean, as long as it ain't illegal and it's not immoral, I'm good, And that's, I mean, that I want to be able to find a way to make things work. And the containers just, I mean, unbelievably created an opportunity that's applicable in so many different areas, despite the zoning, and being able to even to create different asset classes. I
Mhm.
mean, I don't know about you, but I'm fired up. Like I'm not going anywhere for the next decade. Like I'm sitting here happy as a clam, and being able to hear the hope in investors, like in their voice when I'm talking to them, and be able to see the dots getting connected. That's my biggest joy, because this mission is so big I can't do it on my own. So that's why I'm like, let's partner up and let's get this thing going, and to be able to get it out there for who they're called to. Yeah, because the guy who loves corporate housing and boutique hotels is not the guy called to affordable housing on Section 8. Nope.
Right, right,
There's no shape in that either.
right, right. So do these homes hold their value? Do they
Yeah,
do they appreciate? I mean, what are we looking at? Because again, we're talking about a container home. People are like, a what?
yeah.
And I when I was talking to you about possibly, coming on the podcast with me, I had told you that for those of you who don't know, I've been in the mortgage business for 25 years at this point in time. I'd never heard of a container home, and he's like, "Oh, this has been around." I'm like, "Really?" So, how do they hold? How do they hold? Do they hold their value as well as a standard built home? Can we start to see subdivisions of
Oh yeah.
container homes that are that offer an affordability factor that we're not seeing in other places? And
Mhm.
is the financing handled as a typical modular home with VA and FHA and conventional options available?
Yeah, I mean, so that's part of it with it. So it's been around for like underground for a long time. People are always trying to do DIYs, but it became mainstream right after COVID. And because when it comes down to being able to create them really quickly, that's been the biggest pro to it. By speed of production. When it comes down to them having comparables, it's still fresh on that, but they do have 100% resale value just because of the durability on it. Yeah, and they have that ability, but also there's a ton of people that are starting to put together communities for just single family residents. There's some over in Georgia actually. We actually have a project going on in Kentucky that is a short term rental slash corporate housing as well, which is awesome. And we're putting together there's other projects that are happening in Texas and in Mississippi, up in Ohio for opportunity zones. And so it really like when it comes to the lending, it really varies. Then that's what's unique is that we're putting together modular multifamily. We're making apartment complexes out of these, which is awesome
Mhm.
because man, especially with vets and that's another thing. Like my goodness gracious, like being able to have these different asset classes and be able to have the loans that are there that are available depending on what's being created on that property. And it's based on the plot. It's based on that person, their business plan, their team based on that business plan. If it's an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit, then we just go through a conventional loan, or some people just do a HELOC. It just varies. But what'll happen is that property equity goes up immediately because it's an accessory dwelling unit, right?
Mhm.
And that's what's really cool about that. And some, I mean, they just tap back into the lender. Hey, really quick, I'm just going to do this. What's the kind of say? Nope, cool. We got to do this requirement for his utilities, expanding it to that required foundation. Done. Pop in like a Febreze. Plug in. Plug it in. Plug it in. I like legit. And that's what's so nuts about it. Like we'll do modular single family homes. Look at the minimum requirements. We got one going on in North Carolina right now. I'm planning on the renderings for. I've got one in Florida that we're going through right now for short term rental. Yeah, it just varies, because a good chunk of them are probably going to be ground up construction loans or lending on that. But even when they're established on property, what'll happen is they'll just get the VIN number and just go through the normal deed process, and just that way they get their term that they're wanting.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I appreciate you, stepping in today,
Yeah.
sharing some of what your passion is, right?
Oh
So, in a perfect world, how would your perfect world look?
yeah. No suffering, heaven on earth. That'd be great, but that's not realistic. Perfect world would be, where people that can realize that the issue and set their emotions aside, and be able to tackle the problem. If everyone had that mindset, man, there be less work, and less. It'd make the world go around a whole lot easier if we just did something about the problems that we saw, and
Mhm.
instead of it just being, oh yeah, that's an issue. And so of course, that's. I mean, I was, a lot of that even being said, we can't control people. So yeah, it's accept ourselves. I don't know about you. I got a full time job, control my own life.
Yeah,
Focus
I
it
know
on
what
me.
you're saying. So, if people want to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
Yeah, they can go to they can go to tinyhomeplug.com and go browse. They're out there. The contact page has www.tinyhomeplug.com. There may be an issue with the domain, but go through the contact page, check off all the boxes on the application, and if you guys saw this episode, put Miss Patrice's name on there as well. because that way I know that you guys saw this, and that way I know to be able to make the connection. But I go through there, it goes right to my calendar. That way you guys can pick a time. We can go through the hypotheticals, go through any scenario that you have. We'll look at even to where you're at, because a lot of times when it comes to planning and project managing, because I'll project manage a whole entire thing, all the whole entire development up to approvals, to be able to make sure everyone's on the same page. And so that's one of the biggest things, that even if you're just starting out, that's still good. And so don't be afraid to reach out, because it's like trying to come to Jesus after you clean yourself up. It just don't work that way. We don't want to go at it bass backwards, and we want to make sure that we have everyone taken care of, that you guys have the right care for your project. That way you don't step into a bear trap unknowingly.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for giving me just a little bit of your time today, sharing a lot about your passion, and what it is you're doing in the battle for home affordability. So I certainly appreciate you being here. And so, guys, that's this episode of Perspective. So I hope that you will join me for our next episode. In the meantime, your day is what you make it. Choose to make it a great day.